Salute from the kingdom of the Son of God and Jesus Christ. May Jehovah be magnified and his Lord Jesus Christ, his only begotten Son, our now reigning Davidic King, be magnified as well. I want to talk about a little something that is very concerning within the Christian world, I guess. There's these unrealistic expectations the church puts on Christians, and even Christian women put on men, Christian men put on women, and I call it the Proverbs 31 Boaz syndrome. Salute, Sister Margaret. Salute, blessing, sister. And what you hear often from churches, you'll hear from the men saying, oh, I'm waiting for my Proverbs 31 woman. The women, I'm waiting for my Boaz. Now, this is the problem with that. The problem with that is we're looking at these scriptures, they're snapshots of reality. They're snapshots, right? They're snapshots of reality at that time with certain individuals. Now, the reality is this, and especially today, now things have changed a lot over the years, but especially today, it's be someone who has some brokenness, especially if you meet, the older you are, you meet somebody, they'll have brokenness, right? And they're coming into your life, not perfect, okay? They're not going to be a Boaz, and likewise, if you're a man, they're not going to be a Proverbs 31 woman. But, this is the good news. The good news is if they love God, right? That's the start. They love God and His Son, Jesus Christ. God can mold them, not into the Proverbs 31 or a Boaz, but simply into the marvelous, wonderful creation that He made them. See, you got to stop looking for a Proverbs 31 woman or a Boaz and just look for someone who is unique in their own special way, whose God saw fit to bring you together. Stop comparing them to a Boaz, if they're a man, or your wife. Stop comparing her to the Proverbs 31 woman, which I agree is an exceptional woman. But at the end of the day, let's be realistic. The times we're living in, it's not always possible. Listen, and even if it is possible, if they don't meet that criteria, don't hold it over their head. Accept them for who they are. Because God, Jehovah, made us wonderfully, beautifully and wonderfully made, counting the hairs on their head. Right? He's made you to be unique. And so for men and women in the church, the ideal shouldn't be to look for your Boaz or one woman. Look for a godly woman that loves God and His Son, Jesus Christ, that is willing to be molded by God into the unique, wonderfully made creation that they are. Not Boaz or even Proverbs 31, which was likely Solomon's mom, but into their own unique creation, their own unique character. So the reason why I say this, because oftentimes in the world of Christianity, people have these high, unrealistic expectations. See, the world has them too. Men and women in the world often have unrealistic expectations of the opposite sex. But this transfers over to Christianity, but I call it the Boaz Proverbs syndrome. Women in the world will often look for guys that are wealthy, good looking, they have everything, right? Men, they look for the Barbie, they look for this, that, young, and all, so they're all looking for something that is unrealistic, right? Oh, but, and they want all the good character along with those things too. But in the Christianity, those unrealistic expectations are painted with lipstick of a Bible. They spiritualize those unrealistic expectations with the Proverbs 31 and Boaz syndrome. Women in the church holding men to unrealistic expectations to be some Boaz type of person, type of men. And men holding women to unrealistic expectations to be some Proverbs 31 woman. And the fact is, if we are honest, each of us, men and women, most of the time don't measure up to that. Why? Because it just is the way life is. It is the way life is, right? It's just the reality of things. However, we can be the unique, wonderfully made creation He made us to be. And when you accept somebody and say, listen, I don't want them to be a Boaz or even Proverbs 31, I'm not going to measure them for that. What I'm going to measure them is accept them for who they are. And as long as they love God, God will mold them into who he wants them to be, not what I want them to be, not what the church's expectations are of them, but what he wants them to be, their own unique, wonderfully made woman or man. So what are the results of this Boaz Proverbs 31 syndrome? Is I've seen numbers of men and women get older because of these unrealistic expectations, are single into their 40s. Not that there's anything wrong with that, because Paul does say that there's a gift of singleness. But let's be real too. Most men and women don't have that. So when I talk to the Boaz, speak of the Boaz Proverbs 31 syndrome, I'm talking about people that want to get married, that want to have families. Well, the problem is people with these unrealistic expectations of the opposite sex oftentimes go into their 40s still single, never having been married or having kids. And then the loneliness starts to creep in, because Jehovah God gave us a solution for loneliness. It's called family. Okay? Listen, I'm married. I have kids. But even if you have been married, been divorced, you have kids, you'll be lonely because you have kids. Even if they don't live with you, there's family, right? You have family, you have things to live for. And that's Jehovah's solution for the loneliness problem, is family, right? Because let's be real, when you get older, you have less and less. Your friends that you might have had when you're younger, they get older, they have their families, they're doing their own thing. And likely, what happens is families fellowship with other families, right? A married couple normally wants to fellowship with another married couple so that their kids can play with their kids. And oftentimes with older singles who don't have kids, because even if you're single and you have kids, you can fellowship with people, your kids play with their kids, even if they're married, whatever. But what happens is these older people have never been married and have kids and want to be, because there are people that have the gift to do that and are okay and content. But these people often feel lonely. They feel left out because they see that it's usually people that are married fellowship with each other, or if it's a single person, they have kids, they fellowship with married people that have kids. Or see people that are single, but they have kids, they have family fellowship. And oftentimes these ones who have never been married, never had kids, because of these high unrealistic expectations, clothed with spiritual mumbo jumbo of Proverbs 31 and Boaz, end up being lonely. And then what happens is they end up being bitter towards the opposite sex, blaming them in a very covert way for their inability to find a woman or find a man. And the copium is, I'm waiting for my Proverbs 31 woman or my Boaz. The problem is God is not a stork. He doesn't just drop off a woman to you and a man. I believe it is very easy to find someone, even a godly woman or a godly man, because, listen, Christians congregate in places, so you have to narrow the places you look for a wife if you're a man. The problem is you have to be willing to accept someone who's less than what we would call perfect, that has flaws, right? And I don't even think, a lot of times the things we say are flaws are not even flaws. They may be flaws in the eyes of Christianity, because mainstream Christianity has like these weird expectations of Christians. It's just weird. I don't want to get too much into that, but a lot of times these flaws aren't even flaws; they're just our little idiosyncrasies and quirks that God made us wonderfully and beautifully. He made us, and even with quirks. It's okay to have quirks. It's okay to have idiosyncrasies. The problem is the one that has Boaz syndrome and Proverbs 31 syndrome is trying to hold other Christians to these unrealistic expectations. You got to be the Proverbs 31 woman. You got to be the Boaz, or I'm not going to settle. And then the gaslighting begins. Oh, my pastor said I don't have to settle because you're not a Boaz. Oh, she's not a Proverbs 31 woman, so she doesn't meet my criteria. That's just gaslighting the person, shaming them for not having your unrealistic expectations because you read a Bible passage. How about just accepting somebody for who they are, they love God, and let God mold them into the wonderful creation. He made them unique. Unique, not like Boaz, not even like Solomon's mom in Proverbs 31 woman. Sure, people like Boaz, people like Proverbs 31 woman are ideals, and we should try to exemplify some of those characteristics. If that's within our skill set, I should say, our spiritual skill set. See, we each have spiritual skill sets, right? I'm not going to try to be something I'm not, you know? I'm not going to try to be somebody I'm not. Well, I'm not going to try to be a Peter, like I'm a fisherman, like a literal fisherman. I'm not going to, it's just an example. We each have spiritual skill sets, and they may not fit into the Boaz Proverbs 31 ideal. But guess what? God didn't make you to be exactly like him. Maybe to have some of those attributes, but he made you to be your own unique person. So when you look at that, and then you look at others in the church, if you're seeking a spouse, say, hey, I'm just going to accept them for who they are. They love God. I'm going to accept them, quirks and all, idiosyncrasies and all, and allow God to mold them into the unique creation he wants them to be, not like Boaz, Proverbs 31. And at the end of the day, they may have some of those characteristics, and amen for that. But at the end of the day, Boaz is dead. The Proverbs 31 woman, Solomon's mom, is dead, and we're alive. Let's be our own unique person that God, who wonderfully and beautifully made us to be. This then will give someone realistic expectations of what to look for in a wife or husband, and you won't have this cadre of men and women in their 40s, having never been married, never had kids, lonely and bitter towards the opposite sex. And that's and a lot of the reason why they're older with having never been married and having kids, because they've had unrealistic expectations when perhaps there were people that they could have met and got married to that would have been perfectly fine, instead of these unrealistic expectations keeping them from, in their words, quote unquote, settling. It will also cause you to love your current spouse, because if you're already married, you also shouldn't expect a Boaz or a Proverbs 31 woman. Just accept them for their own unique, godly creation that they are. Because I'm not a Boaz. I'll be the first to admit it. I am not a Boaz. But what I am is Solomon. I believe a decent guy who loves God and his son Jesus Christ. And so it will also cause you to not have these unrealistic expectations of your wife. But what I see is a generation of older men and women, never been married, never had kids, who are bitter and lonely because of these unrealistic expectations. And again, this is the Proverbs 31 Boaz syndrome.